All right, welcome to another episode of the Joe and Doug Show. We're pumped to be on with you. This is the show where we help you take the next step and become the best version of yourself. And so today, the avenue I want to go is I want to unpack a phrase that was said to me early on, and the longer I live, I found it to be more and more true. And there's three parts to this, so we'll unpack each one. And the phrase was this. It was said to me by a mentor that if you live life with nothing to lose, nothing to prove, and nothing to hide, it's the best way to go through life. It really doesn't encumber you to anything. It positions you in such a way that kind of allows you to be a free spirit and to chase the things you want to chase. And so let me unpack that statement, and then we'll take each part and we can kind of look at that and see if you like it, not like it, and we'll unpack it. So the first idea is if we live with nothing to lose, it doesn't hold us back from risk, right? And if we're constantly worried about losing the house or losing the relationship or losing our health, and we live in that fear of what I could lose, we'll never actually play the game for what we can gain. And so that's more of a risk proposition. And it also tends to keep people stingy. They're always holding on to things. So when we're playing not to lose versus playing to win, it's a shift in mentality. Then to nothing to lose, nothing to prove. If I'm walking around my whole life trying to satisfy a daddy issue in my heart, trying to prove myself to my dad, trying to prove myself to everybody who said I couldn't, sometimes those chips on your shoulder can be motivation, but sometimes they'll drive you down a path or a road that you never really wanted to go down. And so when you're constantly walking around trying to prove to everybody else that you're something that you maybe aren't, it can lead you to some weird stuff and put you in some compromised positions. And then nothing to hide. We live in a world where everything's on display. Social media, everything's just out there for the public, from Instagram to Facebook, everywhere else. So, but we live in a world where everybody wants to conceal a part of themselves. And the greatest damage in a political campaign or to a leader that we respect is when they've concealed something or they've hidden something about themselves because they didn't think other people would see it in a good light or would understand. And then that thing comes to light finally, and it's devastating, it's crushing, it robs them of any authenticity or integrity. But when we live from a place that, hey, this is me on a platter, I don't have anything to hide, it lets you open up, it lets you be who you're supposed to be. And so in that, we'll start with each one. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the nothing to prove side of things. So nothing to prove, nothing to lose, nothing to hide. When you live with nothing to prove, have you ever felt like in a spot in your life like, man, I have to prove myself to somebody? I know I have. And who was that person, and how did you navigate that?
All right. So I spent a good part of my beginning of my life with that, trying to impress my mentors, people that are older than me, family, and whatever. Everybody said I couldn't. I was out to something to prove. And there was one day that I just said, screw that. I'm done playing this game. It's too much pressure. When you do the main reveal, you don't get anything out of it anyhow. So it was just not worth it. So before that, I mean, like I said, it was, family is a hard one. They set you up, care about you, tell you it's all going to go wrong, don't do it. And I was like, no, I'm going to do it, right? And when you go down in flames, they're like, told you so. And when you win, they're like, oh, it'll happen to you next time. And I was like, you know what, screw that. You're keeping me dancing to a song that I really don't like.
Yeah, that's good. I like that analogy. A lot of people get stuck in that spot with their parents. They don't want to let their mom down or their dad down, or they'll go to college and get a major they didn't want to do because mom and dad said you have to. They'll take a job because, they had a connection and they wanted me to work for, Uncle Tony or whatever. And they end up in a career and in a space because they're trying to just prove that they're worth it to
it's not for you
mom and dad. And it's totally outside of that comfort space. I find, too, that when people try and prove themselves, they will often end up doing things that aren't just not authentic, but sometimes put them in a compromised position down the road. So, for instance, in high school, you may try and prove yourself to your friends, and then you'll do something that is out of character for you. You know, you'll go to that party, whatever it is, and it may seem small, but anymore stuff like that shows up on your college stuff, and it can hinder stuff down the road because, well, I wanted to be liked and accepted by my friends or that sorority or whatever. Fast forward a few years, right, and you move into that neighborhood or whatever, and you can end up compromising parts of your character, parts of your life, just because you want to prove to be something that you're not. So nothing to prove really puts us in a spot where we can go after significance, purpose, the stuff that drives us, not the stuff that we think other people want.
Yeah. And there was we were just talking about this in a meeting today. How does this happen that we talk about whatever we were talking about?
Well,
there's a guy when I was growing up that he was a really wealthy attorney, and he had everything. He had cars, he had houses, he had vacations, he had everything you could imagine as far as what all of the rest of us were like, that's the goal, right? Mm-hmm. And one weekend, we read in the newspaper that he hung himself, right? And so we could not wrap our head around, like, what could cause a guy that had everything that we wanted to off himself like that. Yeah. And so we spent a lot of years having conversations about what was in that moment, and we'll never know, but, you know, what one of the big takeaways were that dude felt like he lucked his way into what he got in the first place. And he knew that if he didn't earn it and he could never duplicate it, then he had rampant fear that some way somebody's going to take it away from him and he was going to be stuck, because his whole purpose in life was built on something that was an unrealized thing. So that's the way we chalked it up. And it's a great cautionary tale to not build yourself around the expectations of other people.
Yeah, and I find that especially difficult in the social media world that we live. Everybody's trying to project something on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or take your pick. They want to be known as an influencer, as everybody's an entrepreneur, a CEO, or they put the best version of themselves because they're trying to prove to everybody around them, I am valuable, I am important, and we all learn that is totally empty. At the end of the day, if I'm drawing my value from those people around me, I'm going to be in trouble. My value has to come internally, and I have to be satisfied with who I am, if that makes sense. So nothing to prove, and then the second part of that is nothing to lose, so nothing to prove. And so when you have nothing to lose, man, it lets you put all the chips in the middle of the table and you get to go all in at any given time. But so many people play not to lose instead of play to win. It is the most frustrating thing to watch your favorite sports team, even though, sports is sort of back on, but not really. Nobody cares. But honestly, to watch your favorite sports team get a lead and then play not to lose.
It's the worst.
It's terrible. And so I can remember playing sports in high school and stuff, and you'd end up in a lead, and then all of a sudden the team goes to prevent defense, and then it's coming, right? The big play's coming, the touchdown's coming, whatever it is, and it's so frustrating when you're on the team. It's frustrating when you're watching, but it's so frustrating to watch people who get frustrated with that stuff then do it in their own life. And everything is about, well, if I just do this, I can keep this, rather than, hey, let's push the chips to the middle of the table and go all in on this. How do you switch mentalities in that? How do you go from playing not to lose to, hey, I'm just going to play to win? Because sometimes you're going to lose.
Yeah,
and that's the reality.
Well, and it's sort of like the consistency when you have sort of life principles, and you know what you're supposed to do, and you just buy into them 100%. You don't have to memorize your way into what to do. So, like, let's say for instance, you went home today, found out that your wife won the lottery, right?
Yeah.
And then so you had money today that you didn't have yesterday.
You have to play to win, though, Joe.
Right. Yeah. But you would wake up the next day and you're like, do I have to go to work tomorrow? Do you have to do this? And there would be all kind of questions that. Well, you would go to work, right?
100%.
So totally.
Yeah, I would just.
So I
would get to give so much more money away.
John Public, what he would do the next day, which is he would be a different human being. Yep. He wouldn't just go to work the same way. He wouldn't drive the same way.
That's why so many lottery winners go bankrupt. All sorts of stuff. Nothing would change, except I'd be able to buy my mom a beautiful house and pay off stuff and be able to really position the kids well. It would make life easier, but it wouldn't change anything, if that makes sense.
So I have the law of use, which means if I'm not immediately using something, it's my obligation to push it out the front door, let somebody else make use of it, and then more comes in.
I have a funny story for you on law of use.
Yes.
So you can solve this for my wife and I.
Okay, got
There's
it.
a small dispute in our house right now.
Okay.
So-
Do I get to know who's the who, or are you going to keep it neutral?
I think you're going to know as soon as I give you the scenario. So we're packing our house right now because in 2-3 weeks we're going to close on a new house and we're going to move. And my wife's been a rock star with the 4 kids and packing everything. And, she does a couple boxes kind of every day. And she just kind of wants to do it all in one day. Well, she was down in the basement digging through boxes that end up in the abyss of the basement. We haven't seen them in 7 years since we moved in. They've been tucked on that shelf, And some of it is like heirloom stuff, like, all right, yeah, we're going to bring that, whatever. But then some of it's like, she's like, why do we have this? We haven't used it in 7 years. Like, let's throw it out. So she found a box, and inside said box was a series of items. Some old digital cameras, like clunk digital cameras.
The good ones.
Some still had pictures on the SD card, so we got to look at that. She found all of my floppy disks from college.
Okay.
She found some old, there were Windows games like Age of Empires. Do you remember Age of Empires?
Right.
And games that I had while I was in college. She just basically found a box of like old tech and college stuff. And she goes, I'm just going to throw all this stuff out. She tells me while I'm at the office. And I say to her, honey, you can't do that. And she's like, but we're not going to use it. And I'm like, well, first of all, I have a thing to connect to my computer, so I can check all those floppy disks out, and I kind of want to see what's on there. So don't throw those out. She's like, but these games, we don't even have computers play again. She's going down the whole list. And I'm like, listen, I have to say goodbye to them. And she was like, what? And I'm like, they were mine. They were in the box. Just don't throw them out. Let me come home and talk to them first. It's and I get it. She is hey, if I haven't used it in the last 10 or 12 months, for me, I'm like, I might use this in the next 40 years. Let's keep it. And I know that that's silly with this particular stuff, but we have a tough time with that because I can be sentimental towards certain things. And some of that I think was kind of built in, and we're going to go down this rabbit trail. I know it's not necessarily on topic, but because I think the way I was raised, we were poor, paycheck to paycheck. My parents went through a bankruptcy, a foreclosure. We lost our house. We moved in with our grandparents. So, Christmas was not tons of stuff. Like, you got a couple of presents. And I didn't know any different as a kid. But now as an adult, I'm like, oh, that's why people were bringing us meals at the house. We didn't have any money for food. Like, it didn't click as a 7-year-old. But now as an adult, my mom and I've had those conversations. She's like, yeah, this happened and this happened. I was like, whoa. But part of the mentality that kind of slipped in that spot for us was like we kept junk because we didn't have a lot. So, you made it work, and then you grew attached to stuff because you didn't have a lot. And so then as I got married and my wife was like, no, just throw it out. We don't use it. I'm like, no, but somebody could use it somewhere. And she's like, well, let them use it. Well, we don't know who they are yet, so we're going to keep it until we find. And I've been working through this. And so you would just pitch everything in that box, wouldn't you?
If I knew where a home might be, then I would try to see if somebody could use it. But if not, it's going in a dumpster, like 2 seconds, like without hesitation.
Now, it's funny. At church, I do that no problem. Like, I'll go around, and part of it's because I'm not attached to the stuff. I'm like, oh, this crap's just taking up a room I want to do.
Attachments. You're the reason why you're attached.
100%.
Detach, man.
Yeah,
detach.
100%.
It's just physical crap.
100%. But there's going to be some.
You're allowed to have some things.
Yeah.
And it honestly, the say goodbye.
I have like 4 boxes of like
say goodbye. You at least look
items.
at it and say, "Oh, that's kind of cool." Chuck it. Oh, that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Chuck it. Just get in that habit.
All right, fair enough, Sam. When I get home, I will throw it out, sweetie. I love you.
That's beautiful. I got a tear.
Yeah. So nothing to lose. Sometimes I struggle with that. I think when you live with nothing to lose, it makes you more generous. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Because at some level, when people come up and are in need, it's easy to be like, well, I'm not losing anything here. I'm gaining. I'm winning at life by doing this sort of thing. Recently we had someone in our congregation that came up and said to me they've been the young couple married. They have a new baby, and the dad's from Africa, and he actually has children that are still there, and they've been going through this attorney process and trying to get the kids here and immigration, et cetera, and they came up to me Sunday and they were like, somebody from the church just gave us the money to pay for everything. They were blown away, and I'm like, man, that's so cool. A, because that's happening in my church, that people are recognizing those needs and filling them, but B, that's somebody who's living with I don't have anything to lose. Like, I don't know how much it was, but it could have been thousands of dollars. I don't know what the attorney fees were, but I know they've been kind of making payments and figuring it out, and I've been praying with them through the process. But to hear that from them and to hear somebody go, you know what, nothing to lose, in. And I know that's a philosophy that you aspire to and ascribe to. How do you live that out? Hey, nothing to lose here. Even if I go down to a penny, I don't have anything to lose. Like, I know, because you and I've talked through that. How did you get to that spot?
Well, when you picture, like, you give it, so you feel like it's finite, and if you give too much, you're just not going to have anything left. If it's the boomerang, where if you give it, more's going to come. So your worry is that if I give this away, it's going to come back in bigger than what I gave, and what am I going to do with it when it comes back in? So that's where the mindset switches. And never once. I've given a lot in either physical things or money things. How many times? Go ahead, ask me. How many times has it not come back?
How many times has
it never not come back? Every single time it's come back.
I don't know why I thought you were about to do like a rock impression. It doesn't matter what your name is. It has never come back. Never not come back. I don't know. That's what
negative. I've never used the triple negative, but I did it. Damn it.
Oh, that's awesome. No, it always.
But that's what faith is. So when you develop the faith to the point, you know, giving it away, what's going to happen without question.
You reap what you sow. It always comes back. That's good. For somebody out there that's in that spot where they're hoarding everything, they're in a spot where they can't afford to lose. They feel like if I give 1 cent away, if I don't have any extra time, I can't. There's nothing in everything in me is trying to be taken from me. Like, just have that mentality. What's one simple thing that they could do today that would help break that a little bit?
Give. I mean, literally in any way you possibly can. The practice is you start with something that doesn't create fear by doing it, so you could develop that faith. So something that's kind of neutral in your world, that if you've got a pie in the freezer and you can find somebody to have that, you start the process of getting something you're not using and give it to someone, even if you can't afford to replace it. It doesn't matter. You unload that stuff from your heart a little bit, and you create those detachments from physical things and financial things.
Wow, it's good. So nothing to prove, nothing to lose, and the last one is tough. Nothing to hide, because every guy wants a man cave. Every guy likes to escape a little bit. Every woman has her girlfriends that have secrets, so to speak. And that kind of hidden side of things is interesting. I find that the more stuff you try and hide, the higher stress you tend to be. Yeah. And the more difficult it is, because you're like, all right, I got to remember, what do they know? What do they not know? Like, have I concealed this perfectly from them? Are they on to me? Right. You're always in this kind of paranoid state, if you will, where if you're just like, hey, I got nothing to hide, it puts you on the offensive of authenticity, and it lets you step into that. Has there ever been a time in your life where you felt like, I concealed this part about myself because I didn't think people would like it, or maybe there was a date, or you were like, you know what, I'm not going to tell them about this part of my life, and then it blew up on you, or anything like that?
I've been, from the day that I can remember, have been open and honest about who I am to a fault. Like, I was the guy that said too much. So I had one time I was going to do a radio show, right? And somebody was like, what if somebody calls you and like says something nasty about you? I'm like, I don't know. Are they right? And I'm not. I was never afraid of the stories to be told, because I was really looking back. I did some stupid stuff, but I'll be the first to tell you about them because they make for a great story. So I never claimed to be perfect. And I would say, as much as some people, feel like Joe's a dick, he's an authentic dick. There are people that are polished up that are worse than me, but you think there's something else. At least I am what I am.
Interesting. So we'll go here, and we're going to try and not do politics. Okay. So, but I heard this phrase said about our president, and I found it to be very true, is that he is the most truthful, dishonest president we've ever had.
I'll go with that.
And their point is that everything that he says and the way he acts is 100% Donald J. Trump. He doesn't always get the facts correct, but when he says them, they are 100% true as far as he's concerned. And even his perception, he never deviates from that spot. And I remember, I don't know, it was a couple years ago, I heard somebody say that, and I went, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and I think that's what so many people find attractive about him. They don't necessarily like his personality. They don't necessarily like some of the things that he tweets, and they don't necessarily agree with everything on policy. But people, when he ran in 2016, people went, you know what, he's just a normal guy like me. You're a normal billionaire. But they connected with that. They were like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, he is sticking it to the man. And they just felt that authentic connection with him. Now, he could totally be bamboozling us all because he's a reality TV star.
Well,
Maybe
let me
he's
share
not.
something with
But
you. When you are in that realm where he is, and I'm going to go as far as that there's some genius in his head. Okay,
Yeah,
let me use Elon Musk for example, because he's in the same boat as this. So what we do is we cozy up to a reality that maybe doesn't exist, but we're so familiar with that reality that we've walked around in that reality. We could describe what that reality is. If you go have a conversation with Elon Musk and say, hey, robotaxis, tell me what you know about him. Oh, yeah, I see him scooting around on all over the place because he's envisioned them with such detail that he could say, oh, yeah, it's coming by the end of the year. There's so much detail that he can smell them so much. They're right on the horizon. So I think a lot of times when people delve into that deal where they blur the lines between what's imagined and what's real. When you get commentary from them, sometimes you're describing what they know to be true sometime in the near future.
Interesting. So on that note of kind of authenticity, you and I have talked about that on a couple of podcasts. But I think for most people that nothing to prove, nothing to lose, nothing to hide, I think the one people struggle with most is concealing things about themselves. Whether it's, we have one set of friends that we act this way and another set of friends, we're like, hey, these are my church friends. They don't think I curse and they don't know that I drink. So don't bring that up around them.
A regular dude, think about it. Like these are politicians that get hung up on being outed for something. Like a dude like you and I, and somebody was like, hey, somebody said you were drinking at a party one day. We're like, oh, let me tell this story when I was back in college. It was awesome, That's what I would do. I mean, you'd totally throw him for a loop. Like what? He's fallible? What's going on?
Yeah. We had a funny laugh today with our staff. So we have our staff meeting. We had time of prayer, and then we were in the office, and Pastor Joanne had brought in bagels, and so we were all sitting around, and one of our staff people walked in, and they had put some Bengay or whatever. They were having a muscle soreness, and they said, oh, pardon my menthol. And I made the joke. I'm like, well, stop smoking the Newports and we won't have the menthol or whatever. And they quipped back, it was Winston's when I used to smoke. And we all laughed and had this funny banter. But when you're comfortable in your own skin, like, yeah, I had certain things that I've done and I've been in certain places, and there are certain things that I'm not happy with currently that I'm trying to change in my life and that sort of stuff. But I think when we hide those things, it eats away at our credibility. When we come out like,
but we think if
it outs us,
then our credibility is gone. It's total opposite.
It's total opposite. So yeah, and I know you hear me preach often, but I often say to the church, hey, I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. And so just because I'm in the front with the microphone doesn't mean that I don't have struggles with this, that, or the other thing. So, and I think it makes you more approachable in life in general when you. Hey, I don't have anything to hide.
And it disarms critics, because if they can't take a piece out of you because you just took a piece out of yourself.
No, that's so good. Oftentimes in my first years of pastoring, our office manager would often say to people, just go talk to them. Like they had a perception of what pastor was in their head, whether because of, I don't know, previous pastor or the way they grew up. And she would say to them all the time, like, no, he's like super approachable and stuff like that. And I think I put off that vibe, but because there's those stigmas for certain things, and even, I'm sure there are people that work here that think, well, Joe's the CEO. Like, even though you're super approachable, I'm sure you're around the office doing your thing, and but I'm sure there are people that are kind of like, I don't know,
a little intimidated.
Yeah, and you have that air to it, and so it doesn't matter how much I say, hey, come stop by, you can talk to me. My door's open. It doesn't matter, and so you have to work hard at that one. How important is the nothing to hide portion of this in your marriage and with raising kids?
Super important. And I just heard a psychologist talking about there's some secrets that you in a marriage you keep for the sensitivity of the person that's in front of you. And I'm thinking, are you an idiot?
No.
You don't preserve a fake marriage for the sake of doing it. You let it out, right? Yeah. And so, yeah, it's been from day one that we do stupid things and we're quick to forgive one another and we talk through things. We're partners. It's, way more than...
Now, let me ask, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to.
Sure. I probably will, though.
So I know I counsel couples when you get married, everything is everybody's. So like, you need to share things about your past. You need to share. Now, it's one thing if the other person's like, you know what, I'm not sure I'm ready to hear that yet. That's fine. But you need to be an open book in that sense. So there's nothing in my world that Sam does not know. If she asks about it, she hears about it. Like at some level, there is no gate that I would keep locked to her, if that makes sense. But when it comes to finance, it's very interesting because I know couples, and they're great couples, and they're smart financially, but they won't mix their money. And I'm like, how do you do that? Well, I like to, I have my allowance. They have a joint account somewhere, but the way that now. So, do you guys have all of your money together, or do you have separate accounts? How do you work that for you guys?
Well, she used to mistrust my accounting methods.
And well, because you'd spend your last $300 on a mixing board.
I know, yeah, right. And so she kept her.
She was worried about groceries in here.
And then I had to really get her to trust me. And then she was like, "I'll put your name on the account, maybe." Right? So I had to earn up to it. I'm not allowed to spend anything out of there. But anyway, but yeah, it took her quite a bit to be able to share in that because she trusted her balances. She did it, which was methodical. She was super organized, and I was not.
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning, Sam and I actually think 6 months before we got married, we put a joint account together. We just started dumping money into. Every paycheck we would get, we would just start to pull it up because we had to pay for this and pay for that, as you're going on your honeymoon or you're going wherever. And we're like, I guess we need to start putting our money together because I'm not rich enough to pay for all that and you're not rich enough to pay for all that. So I guess we're going to have to figure that out. And my in-laws were fantastic when it came to our wedding and stuff like that. Super gracious. But that to me is always very interesting because, follow me, if I don't trust you to come together with something like money, it leads to all sorts of questions down the road. Well, what else are they hiding? If they can't trust me to see their purchases at 7-Eleven or we don't have 7-Eleven out here, listen to me, at Get Go.
They just bought a bunch of them. You're going to see some 7-Elevens around here, yeah.
Wow, Slurpees. I love Slurpees.
Yes.
But
here's the thing, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so this trust thing, just like early on, she didn't have a good reason to be able to trust me. Yeah. So it wasn't that she did mistrust me for bad reasons. She had great reasons not to trust my abilities. She didn't know what it was about. Yeah. I didn't explain it well enough. Kept in the shadow. So, even with people who are doing the wrong thing, I'm not going to shame her or anybody else who has to know more in order to. I don't think anybody should just blindly trust another individual, no matter what.
100%. Yeah, you definitely have to have that disclosure. I mean, when Sam and I got married, I had my student loan debt, and then I was the really smart guy in college that thought, you know what, I'll get 7 credit cards and I'm going to get all sorts of cool points. And I left college with $10,000 in credit card debt. That's cute. We went to buy our first condo and I think my credit was 517 or something I had no idea. I never got my credit score done before any of this sort of stuff. I don't know. I was like, it's college. We're going to have fun or whatever. Just put it on my tab.
But at the time, if Sam would have said, hey, if you would have said to Sam, I'm going to manage our credit score, she'd be like, hey, let's take a time out, my friend.
Because her credit score was immaculate. And then over time, I had to learn we had to learn some healthy financial stuff. And honestly, probably wasn't until we had been married a few years that we really started figuring it out. I mean, our accounts were together, but we've learned for us the best thing is for her to make the budget and for me to spend the budget. It's just my natural bent is to spend and to allocate funds for those things because Sam is not a big spender. She would rather, hey, we can figure it out. She's very frugal, and I love that. But sometimes I'm like, you're down to 1 pair of socks. Please go buy socks. No, we can make it another. No, go buy socks. We have money for socks. Go buy socks. But you understand that.
Yeah. So for people listening to this and who may be in a marriage that you don't have 100% seeing eye to eye with people. We run our marriage as a meritocracy. Whoever's good at the thing becomes charged of the thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so we basically go into different areas to find out who's the better of the two, and we decide, hey, you're going to do this because you're just better at it than I am. And so when we want to do shopping fast, it's one of us, and we want shopping to be cheap, it's another one of us. And so whatever mode we sling ourselves into is who gets to do the thing. And so that's the same thing with finances. If you're terrible and you're afraid to tell. Or your spouse is afraid to tell you that you're terrible, then sometimes you have to say, hey, you know what? I try hard and I want to be reliable on it, but let's make you in charge of it until I learn up a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. I had to grow into it, and she's very much the budgeter. She likes her spreadsheets. She's very frugal with that. And I'm very much like, ooh, that's on sale. Let's buy 19 boxes of Triscuits. She's like, but we don't eat Triscuits. I'm like, but they were on sale and I could buy them. That's actually a true story. I showed up. I think it was 10 boxes of Triscuits, and they were I don't know, buy 4 get 1 free or something like that, and I did it twice, and I was like, it was the 5th one was free, and they were only $2 a piece. She's like, we've never bought Triscuits before in our life. I was like, but it was a sale. That's the type of spender I am. Yeah, no mas. But I had to walk myself out of that, and then we did that in our first couple years of marriage, and then I had to learn some healthy principles, and I had to earn that trust in that area back and really navigate it for not just myself, but now for our marriage. And, here we are 11 years later, we're getting ready to buy our second house, and we've just continued to learn not just how to make more money, but how to navigate that in such a way that there's nothing concealed. Everybody can see everything, and we have a weekly budget meeting, all those sort of things to help us navigate that, so that I know, oh yeah, the mortgage comes out this week, don't buy anything crazy.
Right.
Or whatever, and or we're going to have to transfer from this account so that we can do X, Y, and Z. So
yeah, so the worst thing that we hit is sort of like the neglect, where I hit 5,000 things in my world, and I make 5,000 decisions.
Yep.
And I don't share every one of those decisions, but some of them she wants to know about, and sometimes
Sure.
I don't tell her about, not because I wanted to conceal it, because I just didn't know she wanted to know that one.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to traverse sometimes and just go through things and figure out what she needs to know about it before I forget about it, because in the future, a year from now, something pops up, scares her, she didn't know about it, and the trust just melts away. So we got to be real careful about those. The busier you get, sometimes those things happen.
Yeah, you can become 2 ships passing in the night,
Exactly.
and it's like, oh, we haven't talked in a month about
Right.
whatever. Yeah. Well, I think regardless of how people feel about each one of those, I think it's probably a good motto. Nothing to prove, nothing to lose, nothing to hide. If you can live in that space, it'll probably help you in your job, it'll help you in your marriage, and help you with your kids. So pick one of those, and maybe you have one that you really suck at. You're always trying to prove yourself, or you're worried about losing things. Pick one and work on that one. And you're not going to figure them all out, but as you navigate one, you'll watch the other ones all kind of get pulled along too.
Yeah, and you don't have to do it irresponsibly. It's not like,
Yeah.
let's walk up to my checking account and just throw it out the
Empty it.
front door, right? Just for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
Like you
Yep.
have to be motivated by where you think that should go, and then you complete the circuit. It's a whole process. You
Yeah,
gotta get up.
and it is. It's more about the values that you put into place and the principles that you function on day to day. Yeah, and nothing to lose. All right,
I'll show you.
Yeah, yeah. Just need one pair of clothes, and we're selling the house, and everything
Right.
else. No, that's not necessarily what it
not a
means.
good
It
thing.
could be what it means, but it's not necessarily
Right.
what it means.
You'll know if it's that's
Exactly.
what it's meant.
That's good. Well, we appreciate you joining us. We will not be back Thursday
No Thursday. Next
Yep.
Tuesday we'll be back.
because Labor Day
Yeah.
weekend.
Labor Day weekend.
Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you next Tuesday for another episode of Joe and Doug Show.
All right. See ya.